A millionaire marries a woman whose face he's never seen. At the altar, an unthinkable truth is unveiled. The room freezes in stunned silence, and in that moment, he realizes he never knew what love or himself really meant. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise that this will be the best story you will hear in your life. Alexander Pierce was born into privilege, raised among Manhattan's elite, where handshakes sealed billion-dollar deals and marriages were strategic alliances. At 36, he had mastered the art of leveraging relationships for profit. His penthouse overlooking Central Park embodied his philosophy. Everything of value should be displayed, quantified, and admired. His father, William Pierce, had built Pierce Enterprises from nothing, teaching Alexander that emotions were luxuries for those who couldn't afford success. The world runs on calculated decisions, not feelings, William had told him repeatedly. Remember that, and you'll never lose. Alexander hadn't lost yet. His expansion of Pierce Enterprises into tech and sustainable energy had tripled the company's value in just 5 years. Board members praised his ruthless efficiency and business. Magazines featured him as a visionary. But beneath the accolades lurked a pressure that grew with each success. The Pierce legacy demanded more than achievement. It required dynasty, which explained why he now sat in his father's study, listening to a proposition that would have seemed absurd in any other context. The Lawrences are old money with new problems, William explained, swirling his bourbon. Their portfolio is impressive, but their liquidity is compromised. Their daughter, Olivia, is Harvard-educated, socially connected, and would bring the political relationships we need for the Western expansion. Alexander studied the folder, containing Olivia Lawrence's credentials, as if reviewing a business proposal. Her photograph was notably absent. "And they're agreeable to this arrangement?" Alexander asked, his tone revealing neither approval nor objection. William nodded. "In fact, they suggested it. The merger of our companies through marriage would benefit both families immensely." "Marriage," Alexander repeated, testing the word for weakness. He found none. It was simply another contract, another strategic move. "When would I meet her?" "You already have. She attended the foundation gala last year, though briefly." Alexander had no recollection of her. People blended together at such events, valuable only for the connections they offered or the threats they posed. "The Lawrences have one unusual request," William continued, hesitation evident in his voice for the first time. "Olivia wears a partial veil in public. It's a personal choice they've asked us to respect until after the wedding." Alexander's eyebrow raised slightly. "A veil? Is this some kind of religious practice?" They didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. The alliance is too valuable to risk over something so trivial. Alexander considered this. Peculiar, yes, but inconsequential to the business advantages. "Fine. Arrange a meeting." 3 days later, Alexander found himself at an exclusive restaurant downtown, waiting for his future wife. When she entered, heads turned, not because of any spectacular beauty, but because of the elegant partial veil that draped from a small hat, covering the right side of her face while leaving the left exposed. She moved with deliberate grace, her posture perfect as she approached his table. "Mr. Pierce," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was low and melodious, with a quiet confidence that surprised him. "Ms. Lawrence," he replied, rising to shake her hand. The visible half of her face was undeniably attractive. High cheekbone, clear brown eye, full lips curved in a polite but reserved smile. Her hair was dark chestnut, styled in a sophisticated updo. But it was the veil that commanded his attention, a silent disruption to his ordered world. As they sat, he noticed she arranged herself so her covered side faced away from the other diners. Practiced, deliberate. "I appreciate your directness in this arrangement," she said after they'd ordered. "No pretense of romance or coincidental meeting." "I believe in efficiency," he replied. "We both understand what this arrangement offers." "Do." "We?" Her visible eye studied him with unexpected intensity. "What exactly do you believe this arrangement offers, Mr. Pierce?" The question caught him off guard. He'd expected compliance, perhaps nervous acquiescence, not this calm inquiry that felt strangely like a challenge. Strategic alliance, social stability, mutual benefit. He recited the principles as if from a business plan. Your family gains financial security, mine gains social and political connections. Together, we present a united front that strengthens both enterprises. She nodded slowly. A comprehensive assessment. And what of compatibility, personal dynamics? Those are secondary considerations. Successful marriages in our circles are built on respect and shared goals, not emotional attachment. I see. She took a sip of water, her composure unwavering. And the veil? Does that bother you? The directness of her question matched his own style, which he reluctantly appreciated. It's unusual, but irrelevant to our arrangement. Is it? She set down her glass. Most men would be concerned about what they're not seeing. I'm not most men, he replied. I'm interested in what you bring to the table, not what you choose to wear at it. A smile ghosted across her visible lips. A pragmatic response. Their dinner proceeded with discussion of practical matters, living arrangements, social obligations, timeline for the wedding. She was articulate, intelligent, and surprisingly knowledgeable about his business ventures. Not once did she touch the veil or seem self-conscious about it. This composure intrigued him more than he cared to admit. As weeks passed and wedding preparations advanced, they met regularly for dinners and events. She was always veiled, always poised. Alexander found himself studying her during meetings, trying to decipher what lay behind her calm exterior. The mystery of the veil gradually shifted from an oddity to an irritation, not because he cared what it concealed, but because it represented something beyond his control, beyond his understanding. At their engagement party, his father pulled him aside. She's perfect, William commented, watching Olivia charming a senator across the room. Though that veil business is strange, haven't you asked about it? It's irrelevant, Alexander replied automatically. William studied his son. Nothing is irrelevant in business or marriage. Information is power, Alexander. You taught me that. The comment lingered as Alexander rejoined the party. Olivia stood by the window, her profile silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. For a brief moment, he imagined reaching out and lifting the veil, satisfying his growing curiosity. The impulse disturbed him. Later that night, alone in his penthouse, Alexander reviewed the prenuptial agreement one final time. Everything was in order, every contingency addressed. Yet he found himself returning to thoughts of Olivia, not her family's assets or connections, but her measured words, her observant gaze, the graceful way she navigated rooms full of predatory socialites. The wedding was scheduled for 3 weeks later. No lengthy engagement needed when the terms were already settled. As he closed the folder containing their future, Alexander realized with mild surprise that he didn't know her favorite color, her childhood dreams, or what made her laugh. More surprising still was the fleeting thought that perhaps he should. The wedding was efficient, like everything else in Alexander's life. No excessive sentimentality, no dramatic vows, just a tasteful ceremony at the Pierce estate in the Hamptons, attended by New York's elite and covered by select media outlets. Olivia wore a designer gown with an artfully incorporated veil that seemed almost natural against the traditional white. When the officiant announced they could kiss, Alexander hesitated for the briefest moment, then placed a chaste kiss on her lips, careful not to disturb the delicate fabric. The reception was a strategic victory. Alexander watched Olivia navigate conversations with influential guests, her social intelligence evident in every interaction. By evening's end, 3 potential investors had requested meetings, and a notoriously difficult senator had promised to review the environmental permits Pierce Enterprises needed. She's an asset, Alexander's father commented as they watched her from across the room. The word choice wasn't lost on Alexander. In their world, people were assets or liabilities, nothing in between. They moved into Alexander's penthouse the following day. He had allocated her the guest suite, assuming she would prefer her privacy. She accepted the arrangement without comment, unpacking her belongings with the help of staff, while he returned to work immediately, a merger in Singapore requiring his attention. When he returned late that evening, the penthouse felt different. Nothing dramatic, just subtle adjustments. Fresh flowers in the living room, a cashmere throw draped over his favorite reading chair, the scent of something warm and spiced lingering in the kitchen. Alexander found Olivia in the library, reading beside the window. She still wore a veil, though a lighter one for evening privacy. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the book in her hands. "I took the liberty of exploring your collection." "It's your home now," he replied automatically, though the words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't shared living space since leaving for college at 17. "Is it?" Her question wasn't confrontational but thoughtful. "A home is built, Mr. Pierce. This is still very much your space." He noticed she still called him Mr. Pierce despite their marital status. Somehow he preferred it to forced intimacy. "You've made some changes," he observed. "Small adjustments. Nothing permanent." She closed her book. "I left the documents you'll need for tomorrow's board meeting on your desk. I took notes on the financial projections. There's an inconsistency in the third quarter forecasts you might want to address." Alexander stared at her, surprised. "You reviewed my board documents?" "I have an MBA from Harvard and managed portfolio strategies for my father's company. I assumed my skills were part of this arrangement." Her visible eyebrow raised slightly. "Unless you'd prefer I limit myself to selecting floral arrangements." The subtle challenge in her voice caught him off guard. "No," he found himself saying. "Your input is welcome." That night, reviewing her notes, Alexander was reluctantly impressed. She had identified a projection error his own team had missed, potentially saving them considerable embarrassment at the meeting. Her handwriting was precise and clear, her analysis incisive. He found himself wondering what else he didn't know about Olivia Lawrence Pierce. The following weeks established a rhythm. They maintained separate bedrooms and separate schedules, intersecting primarily at breakfast and occasional dinners. She never intruded on his work directly, but left articles, reports, or brief notes that proved relevant to current projects. He found himself looking for these small offerings, appreciating their thoughtful precision. The veil remained a constant presence, changing in style and weight, but never absent. In private, she wore lighter versions that revealed more of her face, but the right side remained hidden. Alexander found his curiosity growing despite his determination to respect the arrangement. It wasn't about physical appearance. He'd never been particularly driven by such things, but about the principle of withholding, of boundaries maintained in what was supposed to be a partnership. One morning, he found her preparing coffee in the kitchen, a space she had gradually transformed with small touches, a copper kettle, handcrafted mugs, fresh herbs in terracotta pots. She handed him a cup prepared exactly as he preferred. "Your assistant called," she said. "The Bennett meeting is moved to 11. I took the liberty of having your grey suit pressed, the one you wore to the successful Westridge negotiation. Psychological advantage." Alexander accepted the coffee, noting how these small gestures had become routine, anticipated even. "Thank you," he said, the words coming more naturally now. "You have that board dinner tonight," she continued. "I won't wait up." "You could attend," he found himself saying. "Harrison will be there. He mentioned wanting to discuss the Asian market. Expansion. You have experience there." A flash of surprise crossed the visible portion of her face. "I wouldn't want to impose on your business relationships." "It's not an imposition if it's strategic." She studied him for a moment. "Very well. I'll be ready at 7. The dinner proved unexpectedly productive. Olivia spoke with authority on emerging markets, her insights earning approving nods from board members who had initially viewed her as merely decorative. Alexander observed her with growing curiosity. In these moments, the veil seemed to fade into irrelevance against the force of her intelligence. Later that week, Alexander's executive assistant delivered a message that disrupted their careful equilibrium. "Mrs. Pierce asked me to inform you that she'll be unavailable this afternoon. She's attending a function at the Lawrence Foundation for Women's Empowerment. Alexander frowned. I wasn't aware of this foundation. The assistant hesitated. It's relatively new, sir. From what I understand, Mrs. Pierce established it shortly before your marriage. They provide support and rehabilitation services for women recovering from trauma. This revelation unsettled Alexander more than he expected, a significant undertaking never mentioned in their discussions of assets and responsibilities. He returned to his office distracted and found himself searching for information about the foundation online. The website was professional, understated. Programs focusing on psychological support, career rehabilitation, medical services. Olivia's name appeared as founder and chair, but no photograph. The foundation's work was impressive, evidence-based, outcomes-focused, with measurable impacts, already documented despite its recent establishment. That evening he waited for her return, an unusual disruption to his routine. When she finally arrived, she paused in surprise at finding him in the living room. "You established a foundation," he said without preamble. "Yes." She removed her coat, but not her veil. "I should have mentioned it." "Why didn't you?" She considered him carefully. "It wasn't relevant to our arrangement. The foundation is funded through my family's trust, not Pierce resources." "That's not the point," he said, surprised by his own frustration. "We agreed to transparency in all business ventures." "This isn't a business venture, Alexander. It's personal." The use of his first name caught them both by surprise. Something shifted in the space between them, a boundary crossed or perhaps dissolved. "What does it do?" he asked, his tone softer. She hesitated, then sat across from him. "We work with women who have experienced physical and emotional trauma, provide resources for rebuilding, therapy, medical care, career training, legal support. Many of them have visible scars, both internal and external." Alexander heard what remained unspoken between her words. For the first time, he found himself truly wondering about what lay beneath her veil, not from curiosity but something closer to concern. "Would you like to see our facilities sometime?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. The invitation hung between them, weighted with implications beyond a simple tour. Alexander felt himself standing at the edge of something unfamiliar, a decision that couldn't be quantified in profit margins or strategic advantage. "Yes," he heard himself say, "I would." The Lawrence Foundation occupied a renovated brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, its interior designed with deliberate warmth, soft lighting, comfortable seating, artwork created by program participants. As Olivia guided Alexander through the space, he noted the meticulous attention to detail. Security systems were state-of-the-art but unobtrusive. Privacy was clearly prioritized, with consultation rooms soundproofed and arranged to ensure discretion. "We serve approximately 50 women at any given time," Olivia explained, her confidence evident as she moved through the space. Staff members greeted her with genuine respect, not the deference tinged with fear that Alexander was accustomed to inspiring. In a communal workspace, women of various ages worked on projects, some artistic, others clearly professional in nature. One woman glanced up and smiled warmly at Olivia. "Mrs. Pierce, just in time. Could you review these graphics for the presentation?" Olivia excused herself from Alexander and spent several minutes providing feedback, her expertise apparent in the specific suggestions she offered. Alexander watched, struck by the realization that he was seeing a side of his wife he hadn't known existed, not just compassionate, but professionally formidable. When they continued the tour, he asked, "How long have you been planning this?" "Nearly 3 years," she replied. "It started as research for my MBA thesis on sustainable non-profit models. The more I studied trauma recovery, the more I realized there was a critical gap in comprehensive services." "The operational model is impressive," he acknowledged, "self-sustaining through the endowment, with measurable outcomes tracking." "We're not a charity," she said with quiet intensity. "We're an investment in human potential. Every woman who reclaims her life represents incalculable value to herself, her community, the economy." Alexander recognized the language of value and return, but applied to something he'd never considered worth measuring. It was disorienting and strangely compelling. As they left the foundation, Olivia's phone rang. Her expression changed as she listened to the caller. "I understand. Yes, we'll handle it. Thank you for letting me know directly." She ended the call and turned to Alexander. "There's a situation at Pierce Enterprises. The Westridge acquisition is in jeopardy." Alexander stiffened. "What happened?" "What?" "Senator Cahill has withdrawn support for the regulatory approval. Something about new environmental concerns." She was already typing on her phone. "I've texted George for the car. We should go directly to the office." The crisis that unfolded over the next hours revealed a coordinated attempt by competitors to derail the acquisition that represented nearly 20% of Pierce Enterprises' projected growth. Environmental activists had been fed misleading information, and key political support was wavering. The board called an emergency meeting, with several members joining remotely. Alexander presented the facts with his usual precision, but could feel the atmosphere of barely contained panic. The Westridge deal had been his initiative, pushed through against some resistance. Its failure would be a personal blow to his leadership. "We need to delay the vote," suggested Harrison, the most senior board member and his father's longtime ally. "Give ourselves time to counter this environmental propaganda." "Delay signals weakness," countered another director. "The market will punish us." As the debate grew heated, Alexander noticed Olivia sitting quietly at the edge of the room, taking notes. She hadn't been invited to speak, yet her presence felt increasingly significant as the discussion circled without resolution. "Perhaps," Alexander said during a momentary lull, "my wife has a perspective to offer. Mrs. Pierce has experience with public sentiment management through her foundation work." Harrison frowned disapprovingly, but several other directors looked toward Olivia with interest. She rose gracefully, arranging her notes before her. "The environmental concerns aren't merely propaganda," she began, her voice calm but authoritative. "They represent genuine fears, however manipulated by our competitors. Fighting them directly only reinforces the narrative that Pierce Enterprises prioritizes profit over responsibility." She laid out an alternative approach, not denying concerns but embracing them, announcing an enhanced environmental commitment that would exceed regulatory requirements, partnering with respected conservation groups, and inviting community oversight. It wasn't just damage control. It repositioned the entire acquisition as a model for responsible corporate expansion. "Most importantly," she concluded, "we should approach Senator Cahill not as an adversary, but as a potential champion. He chairs the Environmental Action Committee and has staked his reputation on being a moderate who balances progress with protection. Give him the opportunity to broker a solution that enhances his standing." The room fell silent, directors exchanging glances that ranged from thoughtful to skeptical. Alexander found himself studying Olivia with new eyes. Her strategy wasn't just intelligent, it was elegant, transforming threat into opportunity. "It could work," one of the younger directors said finally. "The conservation partnership particularly. We've been looking for a meaningful sustainability initiative." "It's too soft," Harrison objected. "Pierce Enterprises doesn't apologize or pander." "It's not pandering to acknowledge legitimate concerns," Olivia countered, her composure unwavering. "It's strategic respect, and respect, unlike fear, builds lasting loyalty." Alexander made his decision. "We'll implement Mrs. Pierce's approach. Thomas, prepare the environmental commitment statement. Jennifer, reach out to the Conservation Alliance for preliminary discussions. I'll personally call Senator Cahill." The meeting dispersed with clear directives. Harrison approached Alexander, his displeasure evident. "A word, Alexander? Privately?" In the adjacent office, Harrison didn't bother with subtlety. Your father would never have allowed a spouse, particularly one with such obvious personal issues, to influence a critical business decision. Alexander felt an unexpected flare of anger. "My wife offered the most comprehensive solution in that room. The board recognized it, even if you couldn't." She's becoming too visible, too involved. First that foundation with its parade of damaged women, now this. People are talking, Alexander, questioning whether you're maintaining appropriate control of your household. My household, Alexander replied coldly, is not your concern, Harrison. Everything about the Pierce name is my concern. I've guided this company alongside your father for 30 years. I've watched you grow into leadership. Don't let a woman, especially one who can't even show her face in public, undermine everything we've built. The words hung in the air, ugly and revealing. Alexander realized with sudden clarity that he'd never before questioned the values that had shaped his upbringing, the emphasis on control, appearance, dominance. Hearing them articulated so boldly by Harrison made them sound not powerful, but pathetically insecure. "Thank you for your years of service," Alexander said, his voice dangerously quiet. "But I believe it's time for fresh perspectives on the board. I'll expect your resignation letter by morning." Harrison's face flushed with shock. "You can't be serious. Over one disagreement?" "Not over a disagreement, over a fundamental incompatibility of values." Alexander opened the door. "My father's era is ending, Harrison. If you can't adapt to the next chapter of Pierce Enterprises, you shouldn't be part of writing it." Later that evening, after successfully negotiating with Senator Cahill and setting the new strategy in motion, Alexander returned to the penthouse to find Olivia working at the dining table, surrounded by papers and her laptop. "The Conservation Alliance is interested," she said without looking up. "They're sending a proposal tomorrow, and the preliminary market response to our announcement is cautiously positive." Alexander poured 2 glasses of wine and set one beside her. "You anticipated all of this, didn't you? Had the strategy ready before we even left your foundation?" She finally looked up, the visible corner of her mouth curving slightly. "I pay attention. The Westridge property includes wetlands that have been subject to conservation debates for years. It wasn't difficult to predict where opposition would focus." "I dismissed Harrison from the board," Alexander said, surprising himself with the admission. Olivia's eye widened. "That's significant. He's been your father's right hand for decades." "He represented values I no longer wish to perpetuate at Pierce Enterprises." She studied him carefully. "And what values do you wish to perpetuate, Alexander?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications beyond business strategy. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Alexander found himself without a prepared answer, without metrics or precedents to guide his response. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "But I know what they're not. They're not about control for its own sake or appearance over substance or profit without purpose." Olivia was silent for a long moment. Then, with deliberate movements, she reached for her veil. Alexander felt his breath catch as her fingers touched the fabric. "There's something you should know," she said softly, "before the gala tomorrow night." Alexander's heart quickened as Olivia's fingers lingered on the edge of her veil. This moment, which he'd wondered about for months, now filled him with unexpected apprehension. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "I do." Her voice was steady. "Not because I'm obligated, but because I choose to. There's a difference." Slowly she lifted the delicate fabric. The scar was revealed gradually, a jagged line extending from her temple down her cheek to the corner of her mouth. The tissue was raised in places, creating a topography of healing across skin that had once been shattered. It wasn't garish or horrifying as he might have imagined, just undeniably present. A permanent record of violence survived. Alexander felt a complex rush of emotions, surprise, compassion, and something deeper that he couldn't immediately name. He realized he'd been expecting the scar, had pieced together enough to suspect it, but seeing it was different from imagining it. "It happened 3 years ago," Olivia said, her gaze direct and unflinching. "A car accident. The other driver was texting. When I went through the windshield, a piece of metal cut through here." She traced the path of the scar lightly. "I had 7 surgeries. This is as good as it gets." Alexander resisted the urge to look away or offer empty platitudes. "Thank you for showing me," he said instead. "The veil was never about hiding," she continued. "Not really. It was about choice, deciding when and how people would see this part of me, rather than having it be the first and only thing they noticed. She smiled slightly. And admittedly, it was a test of sorts. I wanted to know if you could see me beyond surface appearances. Did I pass? He asked, attempting lightness, but hearing the genuine question in his voice. You're still evolving, she replied with unexpected warmth. As am I. Alexander found himself wanting to touch the scar but restrained the impulse, uncertain if it would be welcome. Why tell me now? Because tomorrow's gala is important to Pierce Enterprises. There will be press, investors, political figures. I don't want my face to become the story that overshadows your company's environmental initiative. Our company, he corrected automatically, then realized the truth in his words. In just months, Olivia had become integral to Pierce Enterprises' direction in ways he hadn't anticipated. She raised an eyebrow. Is that how you see it? It's what the evidence suggests, he replied, falling back on factual language that felt safer than the emotions stirring beneath his carefully constructed exterior. Your contributions have been significant. Such passion, she teased gently, the lightness in her tone a new development in their relationship. Try not to overwhelm me with sentiment, Alexander. He smiled despite himself. I'm still learning the vocabulary. The following evening, the grand ballroom at the Pierce Tower gleamed with understated elegance. The Environmental Initiative Gala had drawn an impressive gathering. Business leaders, politicians, environmental advocates, and media. Alexander moved through the crowd with practiced ease, but his attention kept returning to Olivia. She had chosen to wear no veil tonight. Instead, she was dressed in a deep emerald gown that complemented her eyes, her hair styled to frame her face without hiding it. The scar was visible, but her confidence made it seem almost incidental, a detail, rather than a definition. Alexander watched as she engaged effortlessly with guests, noting how some initially glanced at her scar with poorly concealed surprise before being drawn into her conversation. By the end of each interaction, they were focused entirely on her words, her presence, the force of her intelligence. Senator Cahill approached Alexander, champagne in hand. Your wife is remarkable, he commented. She's convinced the Conservation Alliance's director to fast-track the partnership. Apparently, they bonded over marine biology research. Who knew? There's a great deal about my wife I'm still discovering, Alexander replied honestly. The best marriages are like that, Cahill said with unexpected sincerity. My wife still surprises me after 30 years. Speaking of surprises, that move with the Community Oversight Committee, brilliant, completely diffused the opposition while actually improving the project. As the evening progressed, Alexander prepared to deliver his address announcing the new environmental initiative. Olivia stood nearby, reviewing his notes one final time. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the tablet, a small contact that sent an unexpected current through him. The speech was well received, the initiative praised as forward-thinking and responsible. As applause filled the room, Alexander acknowledged the team that had made it possible, ending with a gesture toward Olivia. And finally, I want to recognize my wife, Olivia Pierce, whose insight and commitment to community welfare shaped our approach. Pierce Enterprises is stronger and more visionary because of her influence. The acknowledgement wasn't planned, and he saw surprise flash across Olivia's face before she composed herself with a gracious nod. The crowd applauded appreciatively, many clearly truly seeing her for the first time. As the formal program concluded and guests mingled over dessert, James Whitaker, CEO of a rival firm and notorious for his cutting remarks, approached them with a calculating smile. Impressive pivot, Pierce, he said, his gaze sliding from Alexander to Olivia. Though I wonder if transparency is really your strong suit, given certain appearances. His eyes lingered pointedly on Olivia's scar. Alexander felt a surge of protective anger, but before he could respond, Olivia spoke. Transparency isn't about pretending imperfections don't exist, Mr. Whitaker, she said coolly. It's about acknowledging reality and working with it honestly. Some scars are visible, She glanced meaningfully at Whitaker's company logo on his cufflinks. Others show up on quarterly reports after failed Southeast Asian expansions. Whitaker's smile faltered as he realized she was referencing his company's recent financial disaster, one that had been carefully minimized in public statements. Perhaps, Olivia continued, we should compare notes sometime on how to navigate difficult truths. Pierce Enterprises is developing quite an expertise in turning challenges into opportunities. Alexander watched with admiration as Whitaker retreated, outmaneuvered by her poise and precision. When they were alone again, he turned to her. That was masterful. Men like Whitaker mistake cruelty for power, she replied. It's a common error. Later that night, as they returned to the penthouse, an unfamiliar silence fell between them. Something had shifted, boundaries blurring in ways neither had anticipated. Alexander loosened his tie, watching as Olivia removed her earrings by the window, the city lights illuminating her profile, complete, unobscured. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, a simple question that somehow carried weight beyond its words. "Yes," he replied. "I would." In the kitchen, they moved around each other with new awareness. He reached for mugs while she heated water, their domestic choreography both ordinary and profound. When she handed him his cup, their fingers touched again, and this time he didn't pull away. "I've been thinking about what you said," Alexander began, carefully organizing his thoughts, "about seeing beyond surface appearances. I realized I've been doing the same thing with the company, accepting the values I inherited without questioning what lies beneath." Olivia leaned against the counter, listening intently. "Pierce Enterprises has always measured success in profits, market share, power," he continued. "But watching your foundation, seeing how you measure value in human terms, in lives rebuilt and potential realized, it's made me question whether we've been using the right metrics all along." "What metrics would you use instead?" she asked. Softly, "I'm not sure yet, but I know I want to build something that matters beyond the bottom line, something that might actually improve the world rather than just extracting value from it." He set down his cup. "Your foundation, the work you're doing there, it's extraordinary. Not just compassionate, but strategic, effective." "Thank you," she said simply. "I'd like to learn more," he continued. "Not to take over or redirect, but to understand. Perhaps there are ways Pierce Enterprises could support similar initiatives or adapt some of your approaches." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "Why now, Alexander? What's changed?" The question deserved honesty. "Everything," he admitted, "or perhaps nothing except my ability to see what was always there. I've spent my life believing that value could be measured in acquisitions, in assets controlled. But lately I've started to wonder if I've been counting the wrong things." She moved closer, close enough that he could see the fine details of her scar, not just its path but its texture, the subtle evidence of healing over time. "And what things should you be counting?" "Moments." "That matter," he said, surprising himself with the answer. "Connections that last, changes that improve rather than just expand." He hesitated, then added quietly, "People who challenge you to be better than you thought you could be." The space between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Alexander reached up slowly, telegraphing his intention, giving her time to withdraw. When she didn't, he gently traced the line of her scar with his fingertips, feeling its raised edges, the story written in her skin. "I used to think this would repulse people," she whispered, "make them see me as damaged." "It's not damage," he replied. "It's evidence of strength, of survival." She placed her hand over his, holding it against her cheek. The gesture was simple but intimate in ways their legal partnership had never been. "I didn't expect this," she confessed. "When I agreed to the arrangement, I thought it would be a business transaction. I never imagined—" "Neither did I," he admitted. "I've spent my life avoiding attachment, seeing it as weakness. My father taught me that emotions compromise judgment, that personal connections are liabilities. And now? Now I'm beginning to think he was wrong about many things." In the weeks that followed, transformation came in small moments rather than grand gestures. Alexander attended foundation events, not as a figurehead but as an engaged participant, listening to women's stories with genuine interest. Olivia joined strategic meetings at Pierce Enterprises, her perspective increasingly valued by the board. They began sharing meals more regularly, conversations extending beyond business to childhood memories, books that had shaped them, dreams, deferred but not forgotten. The guest suite gradually emptied as Olivia's belongings migrated to the master bedroom. The most profound change, however, was internal. Alexander found himself measuring days not by deals closed, but by moments of connection. Olivia's laughter over breakfast, the way her hand sought his during difficult conversations, the shared silence as they watched the sun set over the city. 6. Months after the gala, they stood together on the rooftop garden they'd created atop the Pierce Tower, a space open to employees and the community, with proceeds from its cafe supporting the Lawrence Foundation. Below them, New York continued its relentless pace, but up here, amongst the greenery and gentle lighting, they'd created something that felt like peace. "I have something for you," Olivia said, handing him a small box. Inside was a key, simple and unadorned. Alexander looked at her questioningly. "It's to the cottage," she explained, "the one upstate that belonged to my grandmother. You mentioned wanting somewhere quiet, away from the city, where we could just be ourselves sometimes." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved him deeply. "Thank you," he said, then hesitated. "I have something for you as well, though it's less tangible." He handed her a folder containing documents establishing the Pierce Lawrence Foundation, a significantly expanded version of her original organization, with resources to extend its reach nationally. "This isn't a takeover," he clarified quickly. "You'll maintain complete operational control. But I thought with additional resources, you could help more women rebuild their lives." He paused, uncharacteristically uncertain. "If you want to, that is." Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she reviewed the documents. "This will change thousands of lives," she whispered. "You changed mine," he replied simply. "It seemed only fair to pass it on." As the city lights began to emerge against the darkening sky, Alexander realized how completely his definition of success had transformed. The empire he'd pursued so relentlessly now seemed hollow compared to the partnership they were building. Not just professionally but personally, a connection based on seeing each other fully, scars and all. Olivia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "When I agreed to marry you," she said softly, "I never expected to fall in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, new territory in their evolving relationship. Alexander turned to face her, taking in the complete landscape of her face, the scar that had once been hidden now as familiar to him as his own reflection. "I spent my life believing love was a liability," he said, cupping her face gently in his hands. "Thank you for showing me it's actually the greatest asset of all." As they stood together under the emerging stars, Alexander understood that some journeys begin where you least expect them, not in grand ambitions or careful plans, but in the willingness to see beyond veils, beyond appearances, beyond the barriers we construct, to protect ourselves from the most valuable risk of all, being truly known. As the seasons changed, the Pierce Lawrence Foundation expanded to cities across the country, each new location designed with the same careful attention to dignity and healing that had marked the original. Alexander and Olivia worked as true partners, his business acumen complementing her vision and compassion. Pierce Enterprises transformed as well, with a new mission statement that balanced profit with purpose. The environmental initiative that had begun as crisis management became a cornerstone of the company's identity, attracting talent and partnerships that valued more than just financial returns. 1 year after the gala, where Olivia had first appeared without her veil, they hosted a celebration at the Foundation's newest facility. Women whose lives had been rebuilt through the program shared their stories, not with shame but with pride in their resilience. Alexander, listening from the back of the room, felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought him here, so far from the cold, calculating man who had once viewed relationships as mere transactions. Later that evening, as they walked along the Hudson River, Olivia shared news that would change their lives once more. They were expecting a child. As Alexander embraced her under the gentle glow of street lamps, he marveled at how completely his world had been transformed by what had begun as a business arrangement. He had once believed that everything had a price, that emotions were distractions, and that love was merely an illusion. But standing there with Olivia, feeling the promise of their future growing between them, he understood the truth that had been waiting for him all along. The most valuable things in life can't be purchased or controlled. They can only be recognized, cherished, and shared. The scar that had once been hidden behind a veil now stood as a testament to their journey, a visible reminder that healing doesn't mean erasing the past, but integrating it into a more complete, authentic future. Together they had built something neither could have created alone, a partnership based not on appearance or advantage, but on seeing each other fully and choosing each other daily. In the years that followed, they would face challenges and celebrate triumphs, always returning to the truth they had discovered together, that beyond the veils we wear, beyond the barriers we construct, lies the possibility of connection that transforms not just our lives, but ripples outward to change the world around us. For Alexander and Olivia Pierce, what began as an arrangement ended as the greatest investment of all, not in assets or acquisitions, but in the unlimited potential of a love that sees beyond the surface to the strength that lies beneath. Dear listeners, we hope Alexander and Olivia's journey has touched your heart as deeply as it has touched ours. Their story reminds us that true connection happens when we look beyond appearances and find the courage to be seen for who we truly are. Life, like this story, often presents us with unexpected turns that lead to our greatest transformations. If you've ever experienced a moment where someone saw beyond your surface to the person you truly are, or if you've been changed by seeing someone else's authentic self, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. For more stories that explore the depths of human connection and transformation, subscribe to our channel and join our community of listeners who believe in the power of authentic relationships. Each week, we bring you carefully crafted narratives that remind us of the beauty in vulnerability and the strength found in genuine love. If this story moved you, please give it a like. It helps us know which journeys resonate most with you. And don't forget to share it with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful relationships begin in the most unexpected arrangements. Until our paths cross in the next story, remember that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars or assets, but in the connections that transform us from within.